You have probably cut a papaya many times in your life. Maybe at breakfast, in a fruit salad, or simply to eat with a little sugar or granola. It's such a simple thing that no one really thinks much about it. You grab a knife, cut the papaya in half, remove the seeds, and that's it. But there's a curious detail that almost no one notices. In fact, most people make the same mistake every time they cut a papaya, and they don't even realize that this may cause them to lose the best part of the fruit. And the most surprising part is that this mistake is in the way the papaya is cut. Once you discover this, it becomes hard to go back to cutting it the old way. Now take a look at this detail, because maybe you are doing it wrong without realizing it. No one notices this mistake when cutting a papaya. Papaya is one of the most popular fruits in the world. Present in breakfasts, fruit salads, smoothies, and desserts, it is known for its sweet flavor, soft texture, and health benefits. In Brazil, it is part of the daily routine of millions of people. Many people start the day with half a papaya on their plate. Others prefer to cut it into cubes to mix with other fruits. Some like to add oats, honey, or granola on top. But there is something curious about papaya that goes unnoticed by most people. Even though it is a very common fruit, almost no one actually learns the correct way to cut it. And that's exactly where a simple mistake happens, but one that changes the whole experience of eating the fruit. This mistake starts with the very first cut. When people grab a papaya, most of them do exactly the same thing. They place the fruit on the cutting board and slice it lengthwise, dividing the papaya into two long halves. Then they use a spoon to remove the seeds. And then they cut it into slices or simply eat it with a spoon. This way of cutting is so common that it seems like the only possible way. But there is a curious detail about papaya. The structure of the fruit makes this type of cut not the most efficient. This happens because papaya has natural fibers that follow a specific direction. When you cut it lengthwise, you are cutting along the fibers. This makes the pieces longer, more fragile, and sometimes even harder to separate. In addition, the juice from the fruit often starts to run out more quickly. Now there is another way of cutting it that many people don't know. Instead of cutting the papaya lengthwise, some people prefer to start by slicing the fruit into rounds. In other words, in the opposite direction. First you remove the ends. Then you cut the papaya into thick slices. Only after that do you remove the seeds from each piece. This method has some interesting advantages. First, the pieces become firmer. Second, it becomes much easier to control the size of the slices. And third, you can make better use of the flesh close to the skin. But this is not the only interesting detail about cutting papaya. There is another very common mistake that almost no one notices. Many people remove the seeds carelessly, and end up discarding part of the pulp along with them. This happens because the spoon goes too deep. And without realizing it, a layer of the fruit goes away with it. It may seem like a small amount. But when this happens every time, the amount wasted can be bigger than it seems. Some people prefer another simple trick. Instead of using a spoon, they use the tip of the knife to loosen the seeds more precisely. That way, only the seeds are removed, and almost no pulp is wasted. But perhaps the most curious part of papaya is something many people have never noticed. The seeds. Almost everyone simply throws them away. However, they have an interesting characteristic. Some people say their flavor is a little similar to black pepper. Because of that, in some places they are even dried and used as a seasoning. Of course, not everyone likes the taste. But it is a curious detail that few people know. Another interesting fact about papaya is that the level of sweetness can vary within the fruit itself. The part closer to the skin tends to be a little firmer. Meanwhile, the central region tends to be softer and sweeter. When papaya is cut the traditional way, these parts sometimes get mixed together. But when it is cut into slices, it becomes easier to notice these differences. And that even changes the way it is served. For example, some people prefer to use the slices to create more beautiful plates. Especially at breakfasts or buffets. The presentation looks more organized. Another curious detail involves the skin. Many people think the only way to eat papaya is by completely removing the skin. But in some recipes, it is removed only after cutting the fruit. This makes it easier to prepare perfect cubes or slices. There is also a small trick used by some people in the kitchen. When the papaya is very ripe, it can become slippery on the cutting board. To avoid this, you can simply cut a small slice from the base. This makes it stable and safer to cut. It's a simple detail, but it helps a lot. Another common mistake happens when people choose papaya at the market. Many think that the outer color is the only indicator of ripeness. But in reality, the texture also matters a lot. A papaya ready to eat usually gives slightly when pressed. If it is too hard, it is still unripe. If it is too soft, it may be overripe. This directly affects the moment of cutting, because a very ripe papaya can fall apart easily, while a papaya at the ideal point keeps the shape of the slices. There is also an interesting curiosity about the origin of papaya. The fruit is native to Central America and southern Mexico. Over time, it spread around the world. Today it is cultivated in many tropical regions. And in Brazil there are very popular varieties, such as Formosa papaya and Papaya papaya. Each one has different characteristics. Formosa papaya tends to be larger. Papaya papaya is smaller and sweeter. These differences also influence the way the fruit is cut. Larger papayas are often cut into slices, while smaller ones are often served in halves. But regardless of the type of papaya, the most important detail is still the first cut. Because that's where the mistake almost no one notices happens. Most people always cut it the same way, simply out of habit, without thinking that there might be another way. And when someone tries cutting it differently for the first time, they often realize that the fruit can even be easier to serve. Small details like this reveal something interesting about everyday cooking. Many times we do certain things automatically, without ever questioning whether there might be a better way. But when we discover a small trick, it can completely change something we have been doing for years. And the most curious part is that once you notice it, it becomes hard to ignore. The next time you pick up a papaya to cut, you might remember this detail. And you might even try cutting it in a different way. Because sometimes a simple action we repeat for years hides a detail that almost no one notices.